of this passage, of these opening verses, we see from the commentary of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh. And the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh, the great rabbi who came from Morocco before moving to Yerushalayim, he says a couple of points here which are essential for us. He says, first of all, he disagrees with Rashi's approach. And Rashi says that Miriam spoke to Aaron and Moshe was not there. The Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh says that it's possible that, and when he says possible, it means this is what he thinks, that Miriam and Aaron spoke in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. They spoke in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, that's where they were speaking. And he says, how do I know that? He says it's logical. By logical means it says this is what the text seems to be saying. He said, if they only been talking amongst each other, why would Moshe have cared? If they're only speaking amongst each other, why would Moshe have cared what they were saying? So therefore, we have to assume that they said what they said as a rebuke to Moshe Rabbeinu. They were criticizing Moshe because they were trying to help him become better. And he says, this is why the Midrash says the words were, Vayishma Hashem Va'ish Moshe. The Sifri, when the Midrash says this, reads this verse as follows. When the verse states as follows, Vayishma Hashem Va'ish Moshe, that it doesn't read it as two separate verses, the way it's read in Ohr Hachaim, as verse 2 ends with God heard. God didn't hear Miriam and Aaron talking to each other. Vayishma Hashem Va'ish Moshe means to say both God and Miriam heard what Moses had said. God and Moses heard what Miriam had said. Meaning to say Moshe was there and he heard it along with God. So what was their complaint? What was the basis of their complaint according to the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh? According to Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh, the basic complaint is that Moses and Aaron felt that the fact that Moshe had abandoned his wife because he said, I'm a prophet and I need to abandon my wife, was actually a silent accusation against those who continued, while they were prophets, to have regular husband and wife relationships. Meaning to say, he was not just doing this pious behavior, he was in fact accusing Miriam and Aaron of acting improperly. And that's the way they took it. And not only that, it was even more than that. And this is why anytime somebody takes upon themselves a more pious behavior, that they felt that it was an act of arrogance vis-a-vis our patriarchs, that they felt Moshe was saying, I'm better than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they never separated from their spouses. And here Moses was, in Miriam and Aaron's, understanding, pretending to be more pious than the patriarchs. So that's the first thing that he felt that they were complaining about. But then he also suggests that Miriam and Aaron were hinting to two deficiencies that Moshe Rabbeinu had as a prophet. One, that they said, well, if Moshe was such a great prophet, how come he didn't start to prophesy till he's 80? He only started to prophesy while he's 80, whereas Miriam and Aaron had been given prophetic powers 77 years earlier. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu, 80 years earlier, 3 years prior to Moshe's birth, Miriam and Aaron were given prophetic powers. And secondly, Moshe had another point, which was another deficiency, which was on the day that he became a prophet, on that same day, according to Exodus chapter 4, verse 6, he got the tsaras, he got this biblical disease. And Miriam and Aaron had never gotten this disease. And so therefore, Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh says that they were pointing out that Moshe Rabbeinu was not a better prophet than us. In fact, he's worse. He only became a prophet at the age of 80, and only he got tsaras. So why does he think that he needs to separate from his wife? And so the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh, I'll just tell 2 more points before we stop. He says, Vayishma Hashem, Hashem heard. So the Torah is writing these words to tell us that Miriam and Aaron nobody else heard. Only God heard these words. He didn't say this like we're talking about Korach or Eldad Ameda. Those were public challenges to Moses' greatness. But here they were just speaking directly to Moses. They were in the kitchen, so to speak, talking directly to him. And another aspect of this is that God heard, and Moses didn't complain. Moses didn't go to God and complain about his sister and brother. God heard it directly. Moses didn't tell on them, so to speak. And finally, it says that the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh says that the man Moses was the most humble. Why does it say that here? Because where is true humility demonstrated? True humility, and this goes back to the question that was raised before, is true humility is really demonstrated most when we're provoked. It's easy to be humble when nobody's starting up with you. It's easy to be humble when you're on your own and everybody leaves you alone. Then you could say, I'm not so great. But when the person comes up to you and calls you an idiot, then it's much harder to be humble. And so Moshe here was under extreme provocation, and still he didn't complain to God. If he had complained, he would have revealed himself as not so humble. So this is the concept here. So let me just summarize what the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh had said. Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh understands that the conversation, this Moroccan rabbi, this great Moroccan sage, he understands that the conversation happened with everybody present, and they weren't gossiping behind his back, but they were challenging him, and they didn't understand Moshe's greatness. They said he should not have separated from his wife. And they also were pointing out deficiencies in Moshe Rabbeinu's prophetic or perceived deficiencies, why they thought Moshe Rabbeinu was not a better prophet than them. They thought Moshe Rabbeinu became a prophet later, and he was already stricken with leprosy on the day he became a prophet. But the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh makes sure to note that God heard this and Moshe did not complain. And the reason why it's important to note that Moshe did not complain, because that's an indication of his great humility. Okay, I'm going to stop. This is the Ohr Hachaim's explanation. Let me just stop the recording.